tried to find out where everybody is on the journey and some of the challenges that they're facing. And one that has regularly come up for us is creating a work-life balance.
When you think about work-life balance, it usually comes with this question of, is work-life balance a possibility?
We come from that place, and in many ways we still are there. That real achievement culture, all the way from school to university to your first job. Is there real joy and health in that way of living?
The thing that was a game changer for me was something I called intending or segment intending.
It's not just time, it's also the quality of the time. And are you giving your full efforts and energy towards whatever it is you're doing?
We look for someone else to give us permission to take time off or to set boundaries for ourselves.
What's the opportunity cost? And then what's the non-negotiables, and how do I build my life around that?
Hello and welcome back to the Emergent Humanity Code podcast. This is episode 5 in our series, and it's great to have everyone back. As always, I'm your host Marlon, and I'm joined by the rest of the team, Priya, Cal, and Mel. Today is a very exciting episode, guys. We have reached out to the community, interacted a lot with the growing movement that we have. We've interacted and we've tried to find out where everybody is on the journey and some of the challenges that they're facing. And one that has regularly come up for us is creating a work-life balance. This is quite an interesting topic, and it is very topical. It's been out there, it's been covered everywhere. So we wanted to take some time and really sort of delve into it. What are our views on the concept of work-life balance? Does it and should it even exist? What are the types of challenges we faced when we're trying to achieve this ideal work-life balance? And at the end, as always, we like to look at some practical methods or practical tools that we can try to implement in our daily life to help us on this journey to achieving this ideal situation of being holistically balanced and finding that sweet spot. So yeah, as I said, it's a very exciting episode because it is chosen it's the first episode chosen by you, the audience, to our podcast. So we're all excited. So I think without further ado, let's dive in. In the first episode, we were introducing ourselves, and I think Cal referenced a quote. She said she saw an interesting quote. It said that there is no such thing as work-life balance. You have a life, and work is a part of it. So Cal, I think this is a good place for us to start to understand, is this a sentiment that you yourself share? And in that, if you do, or whether you do or you don't share that sentiment, how do you thereby consider, how do you view your life and your work and your career and your ambitions? How do you balance it all together in light of this idea of a work-life balance?
Yeah, so when I heard that quote, it was just in passing, it was like from nowhere special. I can't even really remember where it came from, but just the sentiment was so new to me because I feel like work-life balance is such a popular concept. We all grow up, we hear the people around us, the adults around us already constantly talking about work-life balance, work-life balance. And this idea of you have a life, work is part of it, and the idea is to balance your life. It really it stuck with me. When you think about work-life balance, it usually comes with this question of, is work-life balance a possibility, or do we have to choose one or the other? So meaning, do I have to prioritize career growth or career success, or do I prioritize my family life or a more values-oriented life? Whatever that may be. So it implies that choosing one negates the other. Or for me, it implies that work is separate from life. And really, it just is that being out of balance is being out of balance, regardless of which area or which topic is bringing your life out of balance. And you don't really hear people say things like, I need to work on my family life balance, or I need to work on my health life balance. And I think it's because everything you do in those areas, you kind of implicitly know that it's to serve this whole vision of this greater life at hand. Like serving my spiritual well-being enhances my experience of life, building on my relationships, serving my community, all of those things enhances my experience of life. And in the same way, it should be that serving at my chosen job enhances my experience of life. And this sentiment can sometimes, like, it feels a little bit unnatural to say, like, serving at my job is just to enhance my experience of life, because, or I think it's because we've come to this viewpoint of work as a means to an end, as in the literal financial means to attain the result of, say, creating a lifestyle you want, or the kind of life you want to live. And hand in hand with that, for me, there's also this sort of isolation that we've had of success in relationship to our work, because usually the kind of accolades or the financial remuneration is very tied to the concept of work. And like in the other areas of our life, there's generally not really any real accolades for having a well-rounded life, or an accolade for having a centered mind or a physically healthy and agile body. um, but I do think that if we view what we do as serving this greater vision of happiness and fulfillment in our life, then we can decide to what degree we want to give our time and attention and effort and energy to the job. And then that kind of balance, because it's not saying, am I going work life balance? I'm trying to do it like 50-50 for everybody. That's what a work life balance is. It's more to say that for each person, it will look completely different if you're a parent versus if you're single, versus if you have family members with special care needs, or you have the goal of climbing Mount Everest. Like, each person's idea of balance in their life is going to look so individual and so different. So, really, for me personally, at least, I feel like balancing life is the priority, and work being a part of that balance is really what it's about, not, so to speak, the work life balance.
I hear you, Cal. It's an interesting one because when I heard you quote that, my instinctive or my immediate reaction was, no, I don't think so. Because for me, I've always felt that it's an area I struggled with. So I'm generally a very sort of passionate and committed person. So when I'm driven or motivated by something, anything, whether it's be work or whatever it may be, I tend to give it all my efforts and all my energy. And then so when I thought about work-life balance, like I remember thinking years ago, I need to find this work-life balance, because I'm find myself overcommitting to work because I was in that motivated space and that driven space. So for me, my instinctive reaction to that was, no, I think work-life balance is a very real concept, and it is something that I have been working on for a long time. But then as I thought about it, and as I hear you speak now, I've sort of moved a little bit away from that, not in that, not moved a little bit away from the work-life balance side of thing, and more into a balance, more into the concept of balance, so a life balance. Because I found that, as I described, my personality type is it doesn't only pertain to work. It could be anything, whatever catches my fancy or my interests, or gathers my attention. I give it all my efforts, and often it's at the peril, or at the neglect of other things that require my attention and require my efforts. So for me, I realize that I am searching for a life balance. I'm searching for that holistic. I want to be fully present in all aspects of my life, sort of simultaneously at the same time. I don't want to have a period of time where I'm all about work, and a period of time when I'm all about family, and a period of time when I'm all about hobbies or socials or whatever it may be. So I want to strike that balance. And as I said, for me, it's something I've always struggled or grappled with over periods of time. And I often had to put in sort of very tangible measures for myself, or very tangible boundaries for myself, to ensure that I am, if not achieving, then at least making strides towards achieving that kind of balance where I'm giving everything, not just its due from what it requires, but for me, from what I require from myself. I want to be the best husband and father I can be. I want to be the best friend to my friends. I want to be the best son and brother and all of those type of things, and community member and everything, a teammate on a sports team, everything. I want to be all of those things. And to be all of those things, you can't fully isolate everything from for for me, like when work, for example, sort of consumed my mind, I may have been physically present elsewhere, but I know for sure that I wasn't fully invested in the conversation or the activity or whatever it may be. So for me, that striking that life balance is really become the key. So I've sort of come around, or really warmed up to the concept that there isn't really a work-life balance. There's sort of more of a life balance. It's just that work is such a big part of for all of us in our life that maybe we specifically talk about it. But everything else is, like you mentioned, Cal. So is health, so is community, so is family and relationships. Everything is important, and we don't describe those things in the same way we do. For me, it's looking far more holistically at the bigger picture, and I wanna ensure that I'm sharing myself in priority. The way I prioritize it in my mind is the way I want to act out. I want to act out. If I'm saying a relationship with a friend is just as important as succeeding at my job, then it needs to reflect in my action. So I've got to put in all those measures, or those practices in place for myself, those boundaries in place to ensure that I can fulfill them. So for me, there is there there is a concept, but the concept is about balance. It's about holistic balance in your life. What do you think, Priya, on the idea of whether there is such a thing or there isn't such a thing? It's it's a bit controversial, I guess.
Yeah, for me, for years, I have felt like this whole concept of work-life balance, just as a concept, is so paradoxical, or a little bit nonsensical, because it's almost like, how can you divorce work from living? It means I have life and I'm living on one side, and then I go do this thing that is like death, or like not living, because I have to go and do it to be able to live life. But then I'm listening to the conversation, and the question I'm asking is, okay, so is work-life balance a meaningful concept, or does it even make sense to have such a concept? And I listen to it and I feel like there are these ideals that we have in terms of where we'd love to be, that are emerging over recent years around having healthy working environments, but having a healthy body, having healthy social lives, family lives, spiritual lives. And these are the ideals that are coming through. But if they're ideals, and in some sense a destination that we want to get to, then we're traveling from somewhere. There's something that has created the sense of idealism there that we're not living at the moment. And for many years, I think it's been exactly that: hustle culture, achievement culture. You have to put in hard work if you want to succeed, if you want to, even in some cases, not even just succeed, but just provide the minimum lifestyle, for your family, send your kids to school, all of those things. So we come from that place, and in many ways we still are there. That real achievement culture, all the way from school to university to your first job to the next promotion to the next, home that you need to buy, the car you need to have, the schools you need to send your kids to. And it's from coming from that place, that I suppose everybody has started to take a step back and go, either during the process, realizing, is there real joy and health in that way of living, that extreme life? Or in some cases, it's people achieving all the stuff that, we're meant to be achieving, and then going, wow, I thought I would feel better, or it came at the sacrifice of my relationships or my physical health, and then realizing that actually there's a different ideal. So when I look at that, I then think of work-life balance as being absolutely necessary as a bridging concept. So it's a bridge between the state that we're coming from to these ideals and the really great place we want to get to, for now being the next phase. And it's almost like you can't just get to those ideal states. You need to slowly move onto a bridge. And so work-life balance serves that purpose as a bridge from where we are to where we ideally want to get to before the next phase of, evolving even further. And then it's exactly as you were saying, Marlon, once you start on that journey, you don't stay on the bridge. So you don't stay on the bridge of work-life balance. This like unfolding happens when you realize actually there's work-life balance in its essence is a little bit of a nonsensical concept. So it's the bridge, and then we need to move beyond that to get into a holistic life balance phase. So I guess that's what we're all hopefully striving towards or moving towards in some sense. Mel, what are your thoughts?
No, I'm hearing what you're saying because I think from my side, the concept of the bridge is such a powerful one. Because if I answer this question for myself, conceptually, I've always resonated with it. We have a life, and work is one aspect of that life. But my actions and the way that I was living my life was very devoid from that. So, in answering this question, I took a step back and I was asking myself, what does it mean when I say I need to have a work-life balance? Or when any of our viewers or anybody around says, I want to have a better work-life balance, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that the work I do doesn't give me any value besides the financial benefit? And then I've got to, as you were saying, Priya, I go do this to die, and then I go and do something else to live, like spending time with my family, my health, all of that. So I think for myself, what I had to realize is if I'm really honest with myself, I also have to understand that there's a lot of value that I get from work. So it's the concept of achieving, being respected, having an effect on outcomes, having an effect on people's lives, having other people have an effect on me. And I also had to let go of the humble brag that I think a lot of us do around saying, I work too hard, or I'm too good at my job, or oh, it must be nice to be playing golf on a Friday at 2 o'clock. We all do this humble brag and we glorify working really hard, but we don't do the same thing with drugs or alcohol. We don't say, I'm a really hard drinker, but we do that with work. So I think for myself, it's just the ability to say, what value am I actually getting from this experience of working too hard? And if I really want to have a full, well-rounded life, then I also have to understand that there's a lot of value I get from it. And how do I balance that value with all the other value I want to get out of the rest of my life?
Nice, really interesting perspectives, guys. I think it's clear to see that this is going to be a fun conversation because there's no black and white to it. A lot of it is individual dependent and it's circumstance dependent, but there's underlying concepts that we want to try to get across about best ways for us to manage it and to try to create sort of principles that we can live by to to create this balanced life in whatever field or sphere of life you're in. And just in talking about that, I'm thinking that our career paths are different. We serve in four completely different careers. We serve at different tiers, different roles, different levels of responsibilities on the work side, but even on the life side, on the outside of work side of things. A lot of our lifestyle choices or hobbies or activities or things we do, they vary quite a bit across us. So I'm looking and thinking, this is a nice little sample of the population out there. And a nice way to look at it is that if we can able to help each other and lean on each other and take on each other's advice and sort of find what works for you and apply it in your life. So I think today I want to get a little bit more practical with some of our life experiences, the challenges that we face towards achieving this balance, and sort of what steps did you do? How did you, Priya, in your words, how did you start to build that bridge? How did you get that bridge? If you're already across the bridge, if you're in the middle of the bridge, maybe if you're an audience member out there listening and not knowing how to start building that bridge. I think that's the idea. And for us, I think the best way is to look at some of our individual experiences. And I'm sure it will resonate with each and every one of you. One of our stories would resonate in some way with each and every one of you. So I think with that, I'm going to start first with Priya. Priya, you've obviously climbed the corporate ladder extensively over a number of years now. And I've known you all through that time, and I've watched you fulfill many different roles. Have different levels of responsibility. How did you find managing that work-life balance at different roles, in different phases, and in different job demands at a time? And then secondly, did you, as you took on more responsibility or as you grew in the professional world, did you find that your out of work life suffered? Did you have to sacrifice time? Did you have to sacrifice activities or hobbies, or was it quality that had to be sacrificed, or perhaps there was no sacrifice at all? I'm intrigued to hear somebody who's served in so many different positions, how you've managed it.
So to answer your question, no, not at all. I was perfect at it all along. Challenge. No, it's one of those things that has been a continuous journey for me throughout my career, specifically my career and my working life, and continues to be something that I have to work on intentionally. So there are two things let me say, battle with. It's this work-life integration, living an integrated whole life, and my love of sugar is the other one, my love of chocolates and desserts. So those things are daily work for me. But yeah, I think just going through my journey over a number of years, if I think way back in the early stages of my career, which I mean, for many years was actually, I was fully in grind mode, in like working hard. I've always loved the jobs I did. So that's a beautiful thing, but it also doesn't help this balance story, because when you love something, you can just pour yourself into it. So I've always been able to just pour into my work. And there was a really long time where I believed very much in the narrative of just working very hard and pouring everything you have, as much as you can, into your work. And I also thought that everybody does that, and that's a criteria for success. Maybe not the only criteria, but definitely a base level criteria. So I didn't know that there was another way. Neither did I know it was a problem. Of course, we all face the challenges of, okay, but it comes with the practical. I need to fetch my child, or there's a play at school and I need to stop this to get there. And so, but those just felt like it's the stuff we all have to deal with. It didn't feel necessarily like a problem or out of the ordinary. So the first challenge, or the challenge in that phase, was actually that I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that it was an issue. I didn't know that I might be sacrificing other areas of my life. And there's that, business model that talks about models of competence. So the quadrant I was in sort of was, I was unconsciously incompetent because I didn't know about the skill of living an integrated, balanced life. And I didn't know that I didn't know about it. So that was the case for many years. Um, and then I think one of the great things about working for larger organizations and being in different roles is you get surrounded by such a diverse group of people. So it was a real blessing. One of the first things that started shifting this for me was seeing different people. And I met people who were all kinds of fun, interesting, had different passions, life skills, and were also just different personalities. I mean, I met people who were just soft and sweet and caring, but still exceptional at their jobs. Or other friends and colleagues who would be professional rock climbers and just as relentless about their passions and interests, but be amazing at their work. And then I started realizing, oh, okay, there is a different path out there. I started becoming consciously incompetent. So I was still not competent at that, but I now was conscious that there was a different way. And the challenge I faced there was I now wanted to integrate more of what I loved and have a more diverse life, but I didn't necessarily know how to do it. And I started feeling, you start feeling the impact, you start seeing the tensions a lot more strongly. And so the challenge was really about overcoming my own mind and starting to build my own practices to know that I needed to diversify, prioritize family time, friend time, interests, passions, etc. Then, as I continued on my journey, the next piece that was life changing for me was as I started to manage teams and manage different people and over time business units and became a leader, but then leader of other leaders. And all that complexity comes with one, you're entrusted with a different level of responsibility. You're entrusted with helping others on their career path and how they deliver in the work environment. But you're also entrusted then with creating a culture. And with that came I saw a lot of reflections back to myself. So in other people, I saw people overworking, I saw people not being kind to themselves, all in pursuit of excellence, which I was really, really about. And so those mirroring effects and seeing it in others that you care about and that you're entrusted with leading meant that there was more of a fire lit under me to say, okay, now you need to think differently and show up differently. The immediate response I had was to take on more. So I would think, like, I need to help people. I need to take on more responsibility and do more of the work. And that wasn't the right response because especially in a leadership environment, what happens in the work environment is people look at your behavior and they think then it can come off as condescending. It can come off as, okay, we're not good enough to be able to work hard and still live a balanced life, but you think that you are better, so you can take on more work because we can't handle it. So I realized that wasn't the right response. The right response was actually starting to embody both a culture of excellence, but really excellence whilst having wholeness. So creating this culture of celebrating wholeness and healthy living and people having fun and taking leave, celebrating wins in the team. And then really, as Mel was saying, not glorifying overworking, not being conscious to not glorify those things. And then the next step was learning to lead by example, learning to show up in that way for myself and for the teams as well. And so I think that's where I am, really wanting to be an example of that, but still knowing that every day it's a work in progress. And I think being in that space, my continued challenge is that I find a lot of my self-worth in the value I add work-wise and career-wise. And I'm learning to diversify that. I'm learning to find more worth in just who I am as a person. And so holistically, overall, then I would say my biggest challenge is overcoming myself in that area.
I hear you, but that's the eternal struggle, is it not? The overcoming ourselves. You know, Priya, it's interesting what you're saying, because I posed the question to you, and in my mind, I had time as the primary constraint. Did you have to sacrifice time when you moved on to? But one thing you also started to point out is that it's not just time; it's also the quality of the time, and are you giving your full efforts and energy towards whatever it is you're doing at the time. I think it's embodied in that part where you spoke about creating that culture of balance. It's not just about office hours or not office hours. You wanted people to have that balance in their life because that made them their best version of themselves. And you know, in talking about that, in thinking about a bit about time and the impact of work now and finding this balance, I want to come to you, Mel, because I know that you've worked throughout your career generally in strategic roles, various different types of strategic roles. I know from sales strategy, distribution strategy, just business strategy as a whole was a big part of your professional background. And for me, I've done both sides of the argument here, or both sides of the situation. In that, I've been very practical, hands-on, task-based, and I've had strategic roles. And for me, I always struggled more with the switching off side of holding a strategic role, because I found that my mind never actually switched off. So if I finished work and I went home, that that trying to create that new method or the better system or whatever it may be was always on my mind. So then it really affected the quality of the time that I was doing out of work stuff, because I was not out of work. I was still in work. My body just wasn't at work, but my mind certainly was, and it affected the quality of everything. How do you switch off? How were you able to switch off, or do you have boundaries, or do you have rules or practices that you put in place for yourself to make sure, like, hey, I'm showing up as my best self in everything that I'm doing, not just work?
Yeah, very, very interesting point there, Marlon. I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying around strategic roles requiring a lot of your mental space, the wholeness of your being. You know, Priya spoke about leadership earlier as well. It requires a lot of you. But if I think of myself, I think my struggle with work-life balance, when it was a struggle, was a lot around my compulsion towards work rather than the specific role. So whether it was executionary or strategic at the time, whatever that is, I had this compulsion. And like Priya also spoke about earlier, I felt like that was very normal. I felt like that's what it meant to be good at your job, to have a level of compulsion and a level of always doing more, always trying to find more time, always trying to find a level of excellence at not even thinking about the expense of everything else. And I think the saving grace for me from earlier in my career is just being a parent, because it was a forced switch off from the time I left work and got home and spent the evening with my boy until he went to bed. And I would be very unhealthy, so I would work throughout my drive home. I would make all the phone calls I needed to make to whoever I needed to make to set up the next day. I'd take out a couple of hours to spend with my boy, and then the moment he went to sleep, I would continue working again. I found myself asking the question, can I sacrifice some sleep, or where do I take off this extra time in the day? And it's probably only at that moment that I realized I needed to problem solve in a meaningful way. So I want to get really practical with it. You know, sometimes we can theorize, but I think the thing that was a game changer for me was something I called intending or segment intending. So at different points in the day, I would set an intention for what this time of my day is going to be for or what I'm going to do. So start the day and plan my morning around what is this day going to look like? What do I want to show up like as a leader, as a person in the workplace? Just what value do I want to add today? Then when I left the office, instead of making all these different phone calls, just taking that time in the car to say, what do I want to show up as a parent? How present do I want to be? What experience do I want us to have together? And just having an intention for that. The same for when I was studying, the same for when I was showing up at work with my team, with my family, with my friends. So I think a major thing for me was just setting an intention for that time and area and perspective in my life and being able to carry that out.
I was just thinking as you were talking about, it's not so much the strategic role. It's more, again, you were echoing what Priya was saying, is that it's that internal battle. So it's more regardless of the role, you would always face this challenge, and it's more your commitment to your work, and then I balancing that out with all the other commitments that you have in your life. So very interesting that you say that. And I'm gonna go to Cal now, because Cal is an interesting one, because out of the four of us here, she probably has the most unique career path from, or career type, I would say, from all of us. In that you are, Cal, you are more in the creative arts world, a lot of editing, production, everything to do within the creative world. And for me, that's obviously, I've always worked in a far more practical environment. So when I think about what it must be like to try to create that balance in being in that sort of space, and being not just in that space, but also being that character of person where you're a creative person. I mean, to my knowledge, or from what little I know, creativity doesn't really hold office hours. It doesn't hold business hours. When creativity strikes, that's when you get going with it. It's like it sort of, it finds you, you don't find it, type of thing, which is beautiful as a concept, but it could be very disruptive to finding that balance. So if you schedule something to be done and creativity strikes in a workspace, does the other thing get shelved, or how do you find that balance? Is there something that again, do you also have measures in place, or you feel that it's not necessary, you take it as it comes, you more go with the flow type of character, or how do you manage to achieve that balance in the in the type of environment that you've worked in most of your career?
Yeah, Marlon, I think you're asking the age-old questions here, and everyone in the industry, I think, has their own opinions. We have so many discussions and debates about this. And just to give some context, I guess, particularly with creatives, the conversation is really about how do I balance being able to switch off and really do nothing when that feels like the opposite of productivity. Yet we know, even scientifically, it's proven that being bored, doing nothing, being able to switch off is often what fuels or sparks a lot of creativity and a lot of new outside the box kind of thinking when your mind has that downtime. So it seems counterintuitive, but it's like, in order to show up and be productive creatively, we do actually need time to completely switch off, and they go so hand in hand. So that's kind of like the ongoing debate in terms of balancing those two things. And personally, I think I sort of adhere to or think about it in terms of that the age old writer's adage, which is write what you know. And how I process that is, in order to be able to write what I know, there's the sense of I have to go out there and live life in order to know things and to know more. so that I can write more, so that I can create more. And we've even seen this in some of the most popular, the most famous of examples. And one that I love is Modern Family, which is a TV show that I think most people would have at least heard of. And the creators of that show have said that Modern Family is a product of their actual lives, their actual family relationships. And there's famous scenes from there and quotes from there that have come out of hilarious moments in real life, being present with your kids or with your wife or whoever in real life. And they've used that, recreated it, or built episodes around those things. And I think that's just such a nice way to show how in the creative world, it kind of implies that showing up and being present in your life as a whole is what can really like fuel your creativity, fuel your productivity in your work as well. So whereas I do think that in other industries and other areas, when you balance your life out, when you focus on your health and your well-being or your relationships or your traveling, whatever that is to enrich your life, it sort of inadvertently fuels your work life. You're being able to show up more effectively. Because I'm healthier, I can show up more effectively. Whereas in the creative, or at least how I see it in the creative field, it's kind of like being present and showing up in those other areas of your life often directly impacts your ability to create and to be more productive in your work life as well.
That's that's very cool. I've never thought of it that way, Cal. That it's you actually have in a career where it's your out everything outside of your career is so directly it contributes so directly. It provides you with material. It provides you with content. It provides you with ideas, and it's really interesting to think about. And I think for as you were saying, for us that's not in that creative space, it certainly does, as you said, indirectly impact you. I know for me, it always it impacted me massively. I know if I went to work in the morning and I know I wasn't the best friend I could be yesterday or the best dad I could have been uh, this morning or whatever it may be, then I know it. I'm not the best I can be at work in that space because my mind doesn't have that clarity. It's uneasy. There's a level of discomfort, and just listening to everybody's sort of challenges that they faced throughout their career. When I look back on my career, I think from the beginning, it's similar in ways to what Priya was saying, in that I was very very focused. A lot of because I enjoyed what I did, my career path and my actual job that I took on. I really enjoyed it. I was very motivated. And for me, it's where it differs a little from Priya is where she said that she was perhaps a little bit ignorant to the impact it was having outside of that, or not realizing she thought that that was a normal part of life. Mine was a far more chosen method. I thought I was getting a leg up. I always fancied myself, or I always anticipated in my early career that look, the time is going to come shortly. Being a very family orientated person, I knew the time would come in a few years where I'd have a family, I'd have a child, which will consume a lot more of my time. So I worked probably, I don't know, twice as hard as most others, but at thinking that I was doing the smart thing and getting a leg up for the future. But then as time went on, I realized that I was not really getting ahead. In fact, if anything, I was getting further and further behind. And behind in the sense of, not in the sense of work itself, but in every other aspect of my life, start to fall behind. And the way I would do it is I'd work extremely hard for a duration of a project, 3 months or 4 months, or whatever the case may be. And then after that period of time, I would start to tend to everything that I'd neglected over those 3 or 4 months. So I'd be like, man, I didn't call my best friend in 3 months. Then I'll be off for 2 weeks, and every day I'd want to call him and, probably overcompensate in that area, or whatever area. Or it's like, man, I'm such a fitness person and a sports person. I haven't done anything because I've been working for 3 months. Now I'm going to do 2 sports a day and hit the gym every day, morning and evening. Just go crazy with it for a while. And as we well know, there's no fitness program that will ever advocate that. And likewise for all areas of your life, you can't be absent for a period of time and make up for it in a compressed space of time. That's not how it works. In working and in grappling with that, I realized, look, I have to, as I was saying in the start of the conversation, that's when I started to say, no, I have to take this work-life balance far more seriously in my life. And for a person like me, it's naturally very difficult because I'm a natural extremist or all-in type of person. So for me, then I had to put in very sort of clear measures, plans in place. I had to very much sort of micromanage myself, micromanage my time. And I think as it sort of went on over time, I naturally got better with it. It started to become more organic, and then I didn't have to micromanage as closely. So my plans didn't have to be in such short timelines where I had to be. I knew I could stretch it out a little bit, and I knew, because I started to feel the benefits of that balance. And it was a difficult process for me. But I think for me, one of the, much like what Mel was saying, one of the biggest moments for me was, well, a big moment for me was definitely getting married. But the biggest moment by far was when I welcomed my child into this world. And that changed everything for me. That really was a game changer, because children, as we know, have no filter. So children, if you're not showing up your best self or what they expect, they'll let you know. Somewhere or another, they'll let you know. Whereas the rest of us, if it's a friend or a family member, they'll sugarcoat it, or they may not say anything at all, or they may be understanding of it, or whatever the circumstance may be. So, but children, they don't have that. They'll just let you know. He'd be like, Dad, we just watched this 1 hour show. What do you think of it? And then I realized I've just been looking at the 1 hour show and I know nothing of what happened. So I was not present at all. I was still at work. My body was just there. I was ticking a box, and that's not the parent I wanted to be. And when I look at it in all other aspects of my life, I think about everybody else. I think about friends, and I think about family members. And because they haven't said anything doesn't mean that they didn't feel that way, that you were there, but you were not really there. When I look at the things that can't speak, but speak in their own way, not in words, like things like my body, like my mind, when it tells me you're tired, when my body tells me you haven't been healthy, you stopped training, or you're not eating well, or you're not maintaining yourself. There's very clear signs all the way through that if you're looking for it, that you are not, when you're not in balance. So I know definitely for that period of time I was quite a bit out of balance. So I think for me that was the real important part of life. It was about understanding that I want to show up 100% in every area of my life. I want to be the best. I want to show up. I want to give off the best. And to do that, I definitely had to, as Priya said, I had to build bridges. It was a struggle for me, and I had to build bridges with everything to a point. And then those bridges, you cross that bridge, and then you got to the next one. Like we said, the challenges change, everything evolved, things change, job types change, new relationships come up, things change all the time. So it's always being adapting that. And for me, the important thing was recognizing my personality type, and how it can easily become imbalanced and not even realize it's imbalanced, or so I had to become far more aware of what I was doing, and put in measures in place to ensure that I keep either achieve that balance, or at least be making strides towards achieving that balance. The type of balance I want. And I think in recent times, I've made good progress on the journey. So it's been an interesting one, and it'll likely be a lifelong one. But yeah, that's how I think my
And
career
because
and my journey is impacted.
And because we have had a front row seat to each of our lives together, I can add some color to that. Like your extremism is extreme, because I remember for years you'd have government financials ending in August, I think. And for the months before that, you would be working like extremely crazy hours. But then the weeks before would be insane because you'd work nonstop, like days on end without sleep. You would shower, sleep sitting up with your eyes closed for 45 minutes, and then wake up in 10 minutes. And immediately on the 1st of September, immediately after the submission for financials was over, I remember one year you actually went like at 10 in the morning, you were back from macro with big boxes of like mass chocolates and a whole bunch of sweets. And then you were out golfing and then you were out with your friends. And so, yeah, when you say extreme, I've had a front row seat to how extreme.
Because I felt like I missed out on so much. Like all this time I've been working, like I haven't done anything else, and I was like trying to get it all in before I knew the work was going to come back, and the pressures were going to pile up again. And
Yeah.
lucky or unlucky, but I had Cal there teaching me the art of power napping through that time. Hence the sitting up and being able to go into a deep sleep for short periods of time and almost lying to your body. But yeah, no, look, I think we all can safely say that's not a healthy, and it's not a lifestyle we want. It's not, it was not, it may have, and especially then it may have passed by, or I may have made it through it more through the powers of youth and your body being able to regenerate and things like that. But that's certainly not a sustainable way. Yeah, that's been our career journeys, guys. So it's been it's vast, it's different for all of us, and it's been, as you said, most of us had a seat and watched each other sort of grow into this and develop at different times, being in different phases, and how you managed it. We chat from time to time, not in a work context or in a movement context like now, but just as people chatting, dealing with stuff, and trying to get tips. And I think even those, like we always say in all our episodes, those conversations helped us along and got us to this point. So with that, I think, as we usually like to conclude our episode, we like to it's nice to discuss our experiences. It's nice to discuss our thoughts on these things, but really somebody who's watching now, even us, what do you do when you switch off now and you wake up tomorrow morning? What are you going to do differently? What are you going to try to implement? What is this conversation taught you or made you think about, that you feel is a tangible measure that you can start to put in place tomorrow or going forward to try to achieve this balance? And again, I'm going to reiterate, none of us are experts here, and not a single one of us would say, yeah, look at me, I'm perfectly balanced, I'm 100%. But I think we have learned a lot in this conversation and from our experiences. So I just want to go to each person and say, from your experiences, what could you offer our audience that they could probably put in play and hopefully see the rewards that you have seen over your journey?
The first thing for me that I've noticed, at least, is that when I try to create a holistic life balance, that's what's the easiest for me. So to have a sort of structure in place to balance out each area of my life. And what I want to do is sort of go in and say which areas of my life are actually a priority to me, which ones are important, and then exactly what do I want to accomplish in this area? Where do I want to be? How do I want to progress in each of these areas? And I think the idea of this kind of structure is to almost be able to see things play out when you are a little bit off balance. So if there are times in your life where you're like, okay, now I'm going all in on work, and I've been just consumed by it, as we're saying in this work life balance conversation, there's now sort of a real kind of sense of being able to see, okay, I'm going all in on one area, but clearly I have all these other goals that are now being compromised, or all these other areas with the way I want to develop. And those things are being compromised. And I can see it because I've set up a sort of structured ideal for each of those. And of course, it's going to fluctuate. So for me as well, I do see, as we've talked about, especially Marlon, that aggregate, and I see that balance usually in any given moment in time, there's usually not a sense of I feel so balanced. But if you sort of take a more a wider lens on that, if you take it over a longer period of time, and you can see that, yes, in this period I maybe focused a bit more on career, and then I pushed and I focused a little more on my health, and then balanced that out with some relationships over time. If that feels balanced enough, I think that's kind of the objective, from my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just as you're saying, it's a non-linear journey. So it's something that and definitely for myself, I'm learning and becoming better at, I suppose, every day. But then there are times where I think I've crossed a bridge and I think I'm doing really well. But like you said, Marlon, it may just be that you onto the next bridge, you're starting on the next one and you're not at your destination. So I'm definitely in that space at the moment where I'm still figuring it out. But there are a few big things that I've implemented over the last couple of years that have worked for me. And the first thing is it's just owning my downtime. And what I mean by that is very often in the work environment, we look for someone else to give us permission, either overt permission um, or implied permission to take time off or to set boundaries for ourselves, whether that's, being inaccessible after a certain time in the evening or taking leave days. And what I've realized over the years is we have to lead ourselves, like the self leadership that's needed to know when we are tired or feeling depleted and needing to take downtime and needing to do other things that would replenish us. So just owning that and knowing for yourself when is the right time and making the choice. And there's never a good time, so we look for that permission of, okay, it's quiet at work and I can take time off. But if you know you're not at your best, it's up to you. So it's up to me for myself to make those decisions. Recently, I just took some leave quite recently, and normally I don't take leave in the middle of the year like this because there's so much going on. But I knew there were two things. One is I knew that I needed downtime. And the other is I knew there was something exciting that I wanted to go and be a part of and experience in this time. And so I made that decision and set up my structures around me to support that. So that's quite important. And then the second one I've done is I used to be really bad at responding to friends' WhatsApp messages, WhatsApp groups, texts, etc. I remember one of my friends years ago said to me, sending me a WhatsApp is like sending snail mail, because I'd respond like 3 weeks later as if the conversation had just happened. And that's the person I used to be. And now I realize just those moments of connection, not just on the big things, but on the smallest, silliest things responding to my friends, chatting when they reach out or reaching out to them, friend, family groups, etc. I think that's really important. It helps to keep the connection. And especially if you're surrounded by or you make friends with people who are a lot like us in terms of dealing with the struggle, because it can be easy for everybody to just absorb themselves in work. So you actually have to be deliberate about it. So those are the two very practical things I think have worked for me and I think can work for us all?
So for me, I think I've really been on this journey very specifically over the last 2 years or so. Definitely since COVID is when I started to ask the question. And I think in that time, just spending more time with my family, just the level of consciousness that came around that period being unprecedented, and just having a look at my life and asking myself some difficult questions. I think I really started to experience the joy of life, the joy of spending time with family, the joy of doing other things besides this compulsion for work. And that's not to say that I don't get immense joy from work, but there's definitely a component of compulsion, which is why I operated the way I did for so long. So I think if I have to look at my own experience, the first step for me would be, or was at least, to be very radically honest with myself. To say, what am I getting out of this work experience that is keeping me here? That I'm saying I'm spending time with my family, but actually I'm doing it for them. I'm ticking a box to say, guys, I took you out this weekend, or guys, we went on holiday, but it actually didn't have anything to do with my presence and my joy and my being fully in that experience, and in experiencing it the way that I should. So I think the first step was just to be radically honest with myself and say, what am I getting out of this experience that is preventing me from living a well-rounded life? So that's the first thing. The second thing would have been, what's then the opportunity cost of this? If I lived this way for the rest of my life and my life ended, what would I have said I wish I had done? Would I have said, I wish I had a hobby, I wish I'd taken up an instrument, I wish I'd been healthier, I wish I'd had more time with my family? And then just ask myself, am I okay with that opportunity cost? And then finally, I set up very deliberate, non-negotiable life things that I wanted for myself. So as an example, I decided that I want to be able to pick my son up from school every day. And that was a non-negotiable for me, among some other things. And then it allows me to build my career, my life, everything else around the non-negotiables that I have for myself, as opposed to work being the center of my life and then everything else around it having to be compromised. So 3 things for me: being honest with myself, what's the opportunity cost, and then what's the non-negotiables, and how do I build my life around that?
Nice, nice. I think for me, there's a lot of overlap with what you guys were saying, because as I said, in my experiences, that I had to become very much a planner. So for somebody out there that's really struggling with finding these balances, or they do have a tendency to be a bit too committed or a bit extremist like me, or go too heavy on particular things at particular points in time, I think you'd have to inevitably become a planner. So for me, I started out with that creating that plan was my bridge. It was my bridge. It helped me. It's me saying, I don't know how to get to the other side, but here I'm going to map out how I'm going to do it. So it was me saying, okay, for this week, I want to do this here. I've got these tasks. I know I need to carry out this at work. When I know that I've committed to a friend to have dinner on Wednesday evening. So I'm going to honor that. And I felt that as time went on, I needed less planning. So I would say start with the planning, and I promise you, as you start fulfilling that plan in a month or 2, your plans become a lot not as necessary, and eventually ideally you wouldn't need it at all. So don't be afraid to plan out. You may feel like you're treating yourself, because I initially felt like, am I making myself like a school child where I have lessons, or I have times. But I said, if that's what I need to take the first step towards balance, then I've got to be willing to do it. I'm not willing to sacrifice relationships or health or work or any of it. Certainly not for a matter of of pride or anything like that. I wanted to be the best version of myself. So that was a very big one for me, was laying out those plans. So don't be afraid to lay out those plans and let them evolve and change over time. The second one was, like I mentioned earlier as well, was as I look back, I see there were so many signs in the past to imbalance. Everything was showing me that, or lots of areas were showing me that it's imbalanced in their own way, but I just wasn't responsive to them. I wasn't paying attention to those things. So firstly, like when it comes to relationships with people, like in my close circle, whether it's friends or family or people that I'm close to, I've asked for almost the same no filter that I described the child gives you. I've asked for the same from them. I said, guys, if you feel like, I was there, but I wasn't really present, whether it's to my wife or friends or whomever, let me know. Then I can reflect on it and say, like, yeah, man, I know I joined you for dinner, but I still had work on my mind. So I know I need to put measures in place. And again, also being responsive to the things, as I said, that can't speak, like your body, like maybe you can't speak to all of society around you. You can't speak to every person all the time, but it's being aware, because there's plenty of signs that show you that you're not balanced. So it's about keeping a keen eye and a keen ear on those things around you that say, hey, you're not showing up in your best self. And then once you acknowledge them, like Priya was saying earlier, only once she knew what she knew could she start putting things in play. Once you acknowledge them, you're like, no, this is not acceptable. This is not who I want to be. And this is what I'm going to do. So for me, a lot of it is paying attention to the signs that are around me. And yeah, man, just looking to keep grow, looking to keep trying to find that balance. As I said, it's been a great conversation today. I think it's going to be life is always evolving. So I think we will always be looking to change and adapt our ways and what we're trying to do to create this balance. And who knows, balance in 10 years time could look completely different to how it looks now, much like it looks different to how it looked a couple of decades ago. So it's important for us to be adaptable. But I think with these key principles, it gives us a really good launching pad or a good start to building that that evolution gene within us, so that we're always able to do that. So with that, I'd just like to thank the team. I think that's us. That was our episode for today. Just to the community out there, again, we hear you guys. As you can see, today's episode was completely decided or came through from the community. So please keep giving us your feedback. Please keep giving us your comments. We read them. We're happy to interact. As we said, this is not a teaching or a lesson. It's a movement. We do it all together. So we'd love for you all, please, to drop any of your comments. You can get in touch with any of us. We're out on all the major socials. So please look out for us, and we will see you on the next podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. See you guys soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.